Hi, I'm Celina Patton, Chief of Student Services at the Charter Institute at Erskine. Welcome to Part 1 of the Institute's Educate and Elevate series. We're excited to bring you a series that is focused on elevating you, the future special education leaders for charter schools. Today's session is led by the Director of Special Education, Merrick, and other special guests from the Institute Charter Schools. We welcome you and hope you enjoy Part 1, The Big Picture, Building a Successful Special Education Program.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Merrick, the Director of Special Education with the Charter Institute at Erskine. I'm excited to talk with you today about how to build a successful special education program. Being a special education coordinator in a charter school is a very unique role. Charter schools act like a mini district within a larger district. So you're responsible for IDA compliance within the school as well as student outcomes. You also are able to provide many opportunities for leadership roles within the school. You're able to work with a lot of different people within the school building and learn a lot of different skill sets within the special education coordinator role. Additionally, there's flexibility to try more innovative practices to improve student outcomes and move the needle in education. It's exciting to work with your expertise area and be able to really implement it within the school. Let's hear from our special education coordinators at our schools about what they love about being a special education coordinator and how unique the role is within charter schools.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Matthews. I am from Cyber Academy of South Carolina. So I have been in my position as one of the special education coordinators at Cyber for 8 years. So my favorite thing of being a coordinator is watching the growth of the program and specifically watching the teachers and the lead teachers under me growing into their roles. So I love supporting teachers and other administrators and watching their growth from being a teacher in the classroom to moving to compliance, observation and feedback, and those type things.
Hey, I'm Sarah Love. I'm the coordinator of special services at South Carolina Virtual Charter School, and I really do love my job. I feel like working at a charter school, I am able to build programs and services that other schools maybe cannot, that really fit the needs of our students, because we do have some flexibility and we can create things that no one has done before. I also really love that I work so closely with families and really get to see how working in a charter school setting at a virtual school really helps children make progress and meet their goals.
I'm the special ed coordinator at Horse Creek Academy Charter Schools. One of my favorite things about being a SPED coordinator in a charter school is the flexibility, service, and connection we have. So in traditional schools, we really don't have much flexibility. Here, we have support through Erskine and through our director here at Horse Creek Academy to pretty much fit anybody or to meet anyone's needs that we have. And we have the connection with the district to be able to really reach out to the families and give them the resources they need. We have a lot of support, and it's not as restrictive as working in a traditional school district.
My name is Alan Holmes. I'm the special ed coordinator at Oceanside Collegiate Academy. I think the best thing about being within the charter school is having the autonomy to serve the students in a flexible setting and be able to build those schedules around their individual needs and create the program that we needed here, not based on minutes or requirements. It was more about what the students individually need and the way we've developed the program around that and the flexibility to do that. I think that's what I like the best.
I'm the special education coordinator at Royal Live Oaks Charter School. I enjoy the relationships that I'm able to build with my parents as well as the teachers and the students here at Royal Live Oaks. Being at a charter school has afforded me the opportunity to really establish those relationships through the communication, because it's such a smaller school compared to the schools that I've come from, where they were really large, or I had several schools and I was not housed on the campus. So I would say being at a charter school and being housed on the campus is a positive, because not only learning your students, you're also learning all of the students in the school. You're able to establish a lot of relationships as well with some of the other parents and also the community members as well. And being that I live in the community, it's really great to be able to put a face with with the students as well. So that's one of the positives that I love about being at a charter school.
There's 3 skills that you need to be a special education coordinator. We call these the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and conflict resolution. It takes a strong communication skill set because you're going to be working with a number of people within your school building and outside the school building. You're going to be collaborating with people on coming up with solutions on what's best for students and improving student outcomes. And you're also going to be doing a lot of conflict resolution and problem solving. So what does special education leadership require in a charter school? It requires the expertise in working with students with disabilities, the ability to collaborate and communicate effectively with parents, and also the skills to solve complex problems. You need to have a high level of comfort with special education law and be able to communicate that effectively with the people that you work with. So let's talk a little bit about the leadership skills that are needed within this role. First, you're going to have relationships and credibility. You need to build strong, positive relationships with parents and also the people within your school building, the teachers, the administrators, and other key personnel. You're going to need to be credible. You need to be a source of information that people can trust. And they know when they come to you that if you don't have the right answer, you're going to go and find the right answer. You're going to need to be a problem solver. Daily, you're going to encounter a number of different issues that are going to take time to work through. And being able to effectively work out what the different issues are and coming up with those solutions is going to be vitally important. You need to focus on data. You need to be at the table when school leaders are discussing student data and start to become the expert on what to do with that student data and how to use it to improve student outcomes. You're going to need to be flexible because every day is different in this role. There's going to be minor and sometimes major crises that come along, and you're going to be able to be flexible and adapt to the different things that come along in your school day. You're going to need to be the leader within the IEP meetings. When IEP meetings start to veer off down a different path, you're going to need to be the person that brings everyone back to the table and to the focus of the meeting, which is always the student. And then you're also going to need to lead a culture of inclusion by promoting a culture of our students. Special education students are general education students first, so you're always the advocate for those students. Celina, you've been a special education coordinator in a school before. Can you talk to us about who you build relationships with and how you build those relationships?
That's a great question. Really, it was so important to build really strong relationships with all members and all stakeholders at the school level, which includes parents, administrators, special education teachers, general education teachers, and then it even goes into your related service providers, so anybody you're contracting with, and even school nurses. You have students who have severe health needs, and so making sure you're able to build those strong relationships so that you're leaning on each other for expertise from one another in order for the benefit of the student. The other really important piece is the relationship with us here at the Institute and with their directors. It's really crucial for the special education coordinators to really rely on your expertise as we've walked through a number of different scenarios, so what might be new to them won't be new to us. So that's also really key in the success for a special education coordinator. The how is really important as well. So how do I do this? I would involve myself in school leadership meetings, so when principals were having the meetings, to discuss curriculum planning, anything that involves students, that my voice was present and heard at those meetings so that I could advocate for students with disabilities or say, hey, remember, we can't exclude this group of students. How will this impact them? That's crucial. Being a part of the school-wide trainings for your staff is really important. So again, how does this all impact special education students? What is the responsibility of the general ed teachers? Because reminding everybody that they are also their students, so they are general ed students, so they impact the entire school. Another really important piece of this is the MTSS meetings. So when you have students who are struggling who may not yet be identified, it's important that you have the expert of understanding disabilities as a whole at the table when you're discussing students' needs. Because really you can bring a conversation that leads to what is best for the student, meaning accommodations, how should I differentiate my instruction. So those are really important ways in which you can involve yourself with building relationships. And that way, the more that you are meeting with your school staff, they trust you, they come to you, and you know that your voice is the one that's they're leaning on for that expertise.
Those are great ideas. Thank you so much. We'll be hearing from Celina later on. When you're building your special education program, you need to start with a strong foundation. That strong foundation is your policies and your procedures. Having well-defined policies and procedures will help address a number of scenarios that you're going to encounter on a daily basis. You're going to refer back to these policies and procedures and ensure that they're being implemented within your school. So what exactly are policies and procedures? All schools must adhere to federal and state regulations regarding students with disabilities. All of this is put into your special education policies and procedures. The document is provided by the Charter Institute at Erskine, but there is some flexibility to adapt this to meet your needs within your school building. Of course, you have to abide by the federal laws and the state laws, but how that looks in your school building could be very different from school to school. So each charter school has the autonomy to create their own policies and procedures. Of course, these policies and procedures must be in line with their charter and institute policies and procedures, but there is the flexibility to create things that make sense for your school building. In this example, we're discussing how you set up upcoming IEP meetings. In our SPED policies and procedures, you can either adopt a policy that's already written there, which is the first checkbox, or you can come up with your own policy that makes sense for your school building. For example, a lot of times charter schools may have a virtual option, and so doing something that aligns more with a virtual school and how they set up their meetings could be written in the other box. It's time for a quick tip. Our first quick tip is being proactive in setting up contracts with outside providers. Outside providers are people such as your school psychologist, your occupational therapist, speech therapist, sign language interpreter, physical therapist. It's anyone that's not on staff that you have to set up an outside contract with. You're going to need these people to serve students within your school building based on what is written in their IEPs. And it's important to set these contracts up early. Let's talk about what could happen if you didn't set these contracts up early. In this example, the school has students that require speech language services in their IEP. In order to provide these services, you have to have a speech language therapist. The school didn't start looking for a speech language therapist until a week before school started. It took them 2 months into the school year until they actually were able to find a speech language therapist. Speech language therapists, as special education teachers, are very hard to find. So at that point, the students have missed 2 months of special education services, and the school is now required to hold meetings and address their failure to provide those services and potentially provide compensatory services, which are services that are makeup services. It puts a lot of additional stress on the school. It can be costly, and it's a lot more meetings that have to be held that's expending a lot more staff time. So if the school could just be proactive, come up with these contracts way in advance, months in advance, there's ability to negotiate the contracts and have someone available the first day of school. So let's discuss a situation that involves communication, collaboration, and conflict resolution. Welcome back, Celina. We're going to talk about what would happen if a parent has emailed you and they're very upset because their son hasn't received the occupational services that are outlined in the IEP, and she is threatened that she's going to call her lawyer. What would you do? Would you ignore the email? A. B. Call your lawyer. C. Call the parent and listen to her concerns. D. Contact your administrator. Or E. Both C and D.
So the answer would be both C and D, and this is why. First, you really want to get to the parent and call her to understand why she's that upset that she would feel the need to call an attorney. Because likely you can come to a solution, bring the parent to the table without having to involve legal counsel. But you also need to contact your administrator, because it could be quite costly if it did end up in a legal battle, and the school would need to prepare for that. So your administrator would need to know that we have an angry parent and would likely want to be involved in the conflict resolution.
Great, thank you. That is correct. Creating a successful special education program goes beyond special education compliance. It's about all the little pieces that go into making the big picture. If you're a special education teacher coming right out of a classroom, you're often used to just working with individual students and the IEPs related to those students. Going into a coordinator role, it's about developing sustainable systems and coordinating and collaborating with other people that are working with that student, other people in your school building. But it's always remembering that the focus is the student. We heard earlier from special education coordinators about what they love about their job and working in charter schools in South Carolina. And there's a lot of benefits in the special education role in schools. And some of those benefits include the ability to build a new program based on the needs of the students. So you can really use your expertise in working with students and what those individual needs are and develop something that's unique, something that's authentic and innovative for those students, and something that works to create positive student outcomes. You can have a larger influence on a much larger population. You can also work with a variety of people and grow professionally. You're going to be working with different people that have different expertise within your school building, and so you can learn and collaborate from those other people. And once again, always keeping the student in mind, and the student is the focus. It's time for a quick tip. So building a program in your school doesn't need to start completely from scratch. We have a lot of resources and trainings already out there available to you that you can use. And we've put all of these into our new school guide. And the new school guide can assist you with developing your policies and procedures, but it also develops an onboarding checklist for you to use with your school staff, your administrators, your teachers, and of course with yourself within the new role. And it can help you map out your year with all of the deadlines that are going to come from the institute in your district, but also it can help you develop a system that you need to get started in your school. So we've talked about some of the qualities and skill set that you need to be a special education coordinator. Now let's talk about some of the systems that you need to develop in your school. It's important to understand the why behind each system that's created within the school. Every system is created to not only uphold certain federal and state laws and to have compliant practices that are associated with those, but it also increases the efficiency, which assists the student and improves the outcomes of that student. So once again, the focus is always coming back to the student and advocating for the student, and that's what having these systems in place does. So let's talk about an example of this. Having a system in place for timelines is really important. There's a number of different timelines in special education, as I'm sure many of you are aware of. You have your annual review, your reevaluation review, and you also have initial evaluation timelines. And an initial evaluation timeline is 60 days from the date that the parent signs consent. But why is this important and why is this in place? So let's talk about an example. So the example that we'll discuss is a student, Jill, who is in the MTSS process and receiving a number of interventions due to struggling academically. She moves through the different tiers within MTSS and eventually comes to the point of not making any progress, and the team refers her on for a comprehensive evaluation. So why is there a timeline in place for this comprehensive evaluation? Because it must be completed within 60 days of the parent signing consent. Well, first, there is a federal mandate, and this is also reported to the State Department regarding keeping in line with those timelines in that 60 days. But looking much further and beyond that, is that Jill is not getting the services that she might need because the team is suspecting that she has a disability. So you want to try to do that evaluation as quick as possible, within the 60 days obviously, in order to get Jill the assistance that she needs and the supports that she needs to be successful. It's time for another quick tip. You want to stay organized within the role of special education coordinator because you're having to deal with a lot of different people and a lot of different timelines. And making sure that you have a master calendar, planning all your timelines out is very important. So pre-plan all your meetings for the year with tentative dates. Set the date well in advance of the actual due date because there will always be circumstances and emergencies come up last minute, so make sure you are prepared and setting those dates well in advance. Let's take a look at the systems that need to be developed in your school to create a sustainable special education program. The first one is service logs. You're going to have service logs from your teachers and also your related service providers. So you need to make sure you have a system in place and that that's been communicated to your special education teachers and to your related service providers. Accommodation logs. Accommodation logs need to be distributed to general education teachers, and there needs to be a system in place to track those accommodations in the general education setting. So you need to make sure that you have communication and training with your general education teachers. IFA coding. There needs to be a system in place of communication between yourself and the Power School coordinator in your school to ensure that the disabilities that are in Enrich match what is in Power School. Discipline logs. There needs to be close communication with your administrator to ensure that you are tracking discipline with your students with disabilities. As they get out of school suspensions, you want to ensure that you're having appropriate meetings and following the appropriate processes in place for students with disabilities. Meeting timelines. You're going to have a number of meetings, and we just discussed a tip on how to schedule those meetings. But you have constant communication with all those people that are involved and have to attend those meetings, including your general education teachers, your LEA, and also your parents. Records request. It's important to have a process in place so you're catching all the records that come into your school and ensuring that services begin immediately with students with disabilities and they are getting the services that they are required by their IEP. So you need to have close communication and a process in place with your registrar. Scheduling. You're going to be scheduling not only meetings, but also the services for related service providers, but also your special education teachers. So you need to have a say in that master schedule and have communication with your administrators and your teachers. Related service providers. You're going to be contracting out with lots of different providers based on the needs of the student and what's written in the IEP. So you need to ensure that everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. And finally, reviewing IEPs. You need to make sure that you have a system in place to develop compliant IEPs and review those IEPs prior to getting to the meeting.
So what we do here, we do a lot of different things. So the teachers, they actually track discipline weekly, where there's a spreadsheet where they're responsible for communicating with the teachers, the general ed teachers as well, because that's one of the components, as one of the accommodations on the student's IEP is just that collaboration with the general ed teachers. And then myself is collaborating with the principals, which is really great because they trust me. So when they have that trust for you, they're always coming to you before they even start a discipline referral, just to kind of walk through and talk about it to see if it's even worthy of suspension days. And even after talking with me, we have a Google form that they fill out. And they fill out that Google form and it comes to me immediately, so I'm able to track. And it wasn't my form that I created. I have to give Ms. Trainham credit. She is our guru around here when it comes to technology. So she created this Google form, and we're able to track to determine if it's a repeated offense. So if we need to come into a special review because the child is repeatedly getting suspended for a particular behavior, or if it's just one particular classroom that the child is experiencing difficulties in, so that we can kind of meet with that particular teacher and the child and the parent as well to see what the problem truly is. So that's how we do the discipline.
Scheduling meetings is one of the biggest responsibilities in my job. So I feel like, number one, make a master list. Make sure you have all of your students, the due dates for their annual review and their reevaluation review. So you can easily see that and sort so you know when your dates are coming due. I make sure that I schedule time in my day for meetings, keeping in mind the schedules of related service providers and general ed teachers who I know are going to be required team members. That way, there's always time we can meet together in the school day. I try to schedule annual reviews a month out, which allows for any kind of scheduling issues that may come up, emergencies, that we can still meet our deadlines. Reevaluation reviews, I try to do those 3 months ahead for the same reason. We just never know what might happen, and that gives us some time cushion. I also would suggest using Outlook or Google or whatever your school's email program is that provides that calendar, so that your team members get that reminder jingle on their devices, and you can make reminders for yourself too when you need to follow up.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year when I do the training for the staff, I have a binder for each teacher with the accommodations already in there for each student that is going to be in a class for them. And then that's for them to jot notes and keep their documentation in there. But we also have a Google Doc that we share as a live document individually with each individual teacher I have, that we can keep documentation in there. And it's not, sometimes I ask them for the feedback on their written and to compare with what we've talked about and have in our live document.
So we kind of have several systems in place. We are lucky enough to have a special education Power School person who specifically works on special education 504 EL coding. But our system in communicating with her is simple, but it is involved. So I will show my screen. Can you see my screen? We have some columns here to protect our students' personal information. But what we do is I first run a primary disability report in Enrich, and then I go through and I put the columns here of all of our students. And so when it's red, that means action for our Power School special ed person. So when she sees red, she knows that there's action needed. So this student right here is new to us, and so they need their EFA code entered. So, or if we have a re-eval or an initial, anything we add here will highlight red, and then she knows to go into Power School, make the changes, and then turn it back to white. So we know that the action has been completed. We also run several reports and Enrich frequently. Our operations manager and his team run reports frequently, and they'll let us know if there's any errors. I think there's a tab in Power School that my Power School special ed person checks frequently, like the errors section in Power School. So we try to have several checks and balances, but this is our primary way to make sure that we get everything correct. So our first, again, step is to make sure that we're running that report in Enrich, the primary disability, and it does pull all of them. And then we'll just go through and verify those, and then our Power School person knows to check this frequently, and anytime there's red, which there's a lot of, but these are for different things. But as far as EFA, she knows that this is her responsibility, and kind of have her name just so everybody knows this is Danielle's column to not touch it, except for she and I.
So basically we have this form, and it's a Google Docs form that we use, and everyone has access to it. The SPED teachers, the OT, the PT, the school psych. And whenever we have a re-eval, we try to schedule them 2 months out. And we just all go in and we email each other and CC everyone, the case manager does. And we try to find a date that works virtually for a meeting, because a lot of times we're used to in-house meetings. And a lot of times when you have service providers everywhere, that doesn't work. You can't all meet in the same place. So we can pick a time and a date, and we do virtually. But again, the case manager heads that up, and we have a form that everyone communicates through. So we have the date, the time, and before we have the meetings, we always have a group email going out to make sure that the team can meet that day and time before we talk to the parents. Then we talk to the parents and see if they can meet, and if they can't, then we go back to square one.
Okay, let's take a couple scenarios of what happens when there's no system in place. First one is looking at records requests. Jennifer enrolled in an elementary charter school and began 4th grade on August 24th. Her previous school sent her school records, but nobody asked about SPED records. On October 28th, after receiving a poor first quarter report, the parent asked the 4th grade teacher for a parent conference. At the conference, the parent asked what SPED services she was getting because she had a learning disability. Jennifer had been at the school for an entire 9-week period, and nobody knew that she previously had an IEP. Now the school has to determine compensatory services. So without the system for records requests, students with disabilities may not be identified, and this can be a costly mistake for the school. So let's talk about a scenario when there's no discipline tracking in place. In this scenario, Philip is a student with a learning disability currently enrolled in 7th grade, and he's received out-of-school suspension for various infractions such as theft, intimidation, fighting, and profanity. Throughout the first semester of school, these infractions have totaled 9 days. In January, Philip gets into a fight with an older student, and the assistant principal plans to assign another 5 days of out-of-school suspension, which is going to total 14 days of out-of-school suspension. Without a system for tracking discipline, the school has now violated federal law, which creates liability for the school and the Charter Institute. So what needed to happen in this situation is there's communication between the person that's assigning the discipline, usually an administrator such as an assistant principal, and the special education coordinator. And so they can understand when Philip is getting different discipline infractions, that meetings are being held and potentially a functional behavior assessment is being created, a behavior intervention plan, and also a reevaluation to determine what's going on with Philip prior to it getting up to past 10 days. Wrapping it all up, let's review some of the key points that we've discussed. The first is communication and collaboration with all stakeholders. Make sure that you are always communicating with administrators, parents, outside providers, teachers, and collaborating with them. The next is evaluating all systems that you have in place in your school and ensuring that each person understands their role in the process. Not only do you need to have a system in place, but there needs to be clear communication with all the people that are part of that system. The goal is to create sustainable systems. And when a system breaks down, monitor, adjust, and fix, and then learn from your mistakes. And always remember the focus, which is always the student and what's best for the student, and remembering that you are an advocate for that student. Thanks for tuning in for our first session of the Educate and Elevate series. Our next session topic is going to be developing high-quality functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans. I'm Laura Merrick, and thank you for joining us today.